Marissa had always believed in love, even when it hurt her more than it healed. She had married Damien at 23, swept away by the charm, the promises, and the fleeting warmth he had offered in the beginning. Damien was handsome, polished, and convincing in his care. He whispered sweet assurances in the early days, held her close, and painted pictures of a future that shimmered like gold. Before we go on, I would like to kindly ask that you please subscribe to the channel, like the video and leave a nice comment. It would mean so much to me. But love, she soon realized, was a precarious thing. It could shine bright for a season and then twist into something unrecognizable. For Damien, the shine had dulled almost immediately after the marriage. The charm remained on occasion, like a polished mask, but behind it was something darker: anger, control, suspicion. He had been charming, but only because it made her vulnerable. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A harsh word slipped into a conversation. A sigh heavier than the sentence demanded. Marissa brushed it off, convincing herself that it was stress, that maybe she had imagined the malice. But then came the pregnancy, and everything spiraled. The news should have been a blessing, a reason for joy. Instead, it became the spark for Damien's cruelty. At first, it was a coldness that seeped into his eyes, the way he spoke less, the way his hands were quick to push her aside or slam doors. Soon it escalated, yelling, accusations, relentless pressure. He criticized every movement, every meal she cooked, every decision she made about the baby growing inside her. Marissa tried to understand, to reason, to placate. She begged herself to be patient, to endure, to remember the man she had fallen in love with. But patience has limits. By the 6th month, Damien's behavior was impossible to ignore. He blamed her for imagined slights, called her weak, accused her of making the child without consulting him, as if conception were a crime she had committed alone. He mocked her body, criticized her mood swings, and mocked her excitement about the pregnancy. "You think this makes you special?" he snapped one night, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're just a vessel. That's all." Marissa felt herself shrink inside, retreating into corners of herself she hadn't known existed. She became quiet, cautious, measured. She learned to tiptoe around him, to anticipate the storms and brace herself, praying she could survive another day. Friends noticed, colleagues sensed her distance, but no one could pierce the wall Damien had built around her life. And yet, despite the fear, there was still a sliver of hope. Every time she felt the baby move, every small kick or flutter in her belly, it reminded her that life existed beyond Damien's cruelty. That part of her still clung to herself, to the child growing within, to the possibility that something good could survive the darkness. But Damien had secrets of his own. Secrets Marissa would never have guessed. For all his scorn, for all his accusations, Damien was harboring a truth so personal, so intimate, that it twisted every word he said and every act of abuse he inflicted. He had always carried a shame too heavy to speak, an inability he had masked with anger and control. No one had known, not even Marissa. By the 7th month, Marissa had begun keeping a journal, writing late into the night after Damien had finally gone to sleep. She wrote of fear, of confusion, of the hope that she might find strength to endure. She wrote of moments of quiet joy, the baby's tiny kicks, the smell of her morning coffee, the sunlight hitting the walls in gold streaks, and tried to convince herself that one day she would escape. It was during one of these nights that she stumbled across the first hint that Damien's cruelty was more than just temper, it was a mask. An argument had erupted after dinner, sparked by nothing, as usual. Damien had slammed his hand on the table, knocked over her glass of water, and yelled accusations that made no sense. "Do you think you can trap me with this?" he had shouted, gesturing at her stomach. "Do you think I'm—" He paused, eyes narrowing, voice faltering. "You don't understand anything about me." Something in the way he faltered, the way his eyes briefly betrayed a hint of panic before regaining their cold mask, stayed with Marissa. She couldn't understand it then, but it lingered, small and insistent. Weeks later, after giving birth, the full truth revealed itself in the most unexpected way. Marissa had survived the pregnancy, given birth to a healthy baby girl, and for the first time in months, she felt the strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration that only comes from creating life. But the moment of joy was short-lived. Damien's behavior didn't change. He barely acknowledged the child, barely touched her, and continued his silent campaign of coldness and subtle cruelty. It was Marissa's sister, Elise, who finally confronted the secret. She had noticed inconsistencies in Damien's stories, the way he avoided intimacy, the awkwardness he carried when alone with her. One evening, in a voice trembling with a mix of anger and concern, she revealed what she had discovered: Damien was impotent. He had never been able to conceive a child naturally. Every accusation he had made, every insult hurled at Marissa for trapping him, every cruelty justified by his twisted sense of shame, had been a lie projected from his own insecurity. Marissa couldn't breathe. Anger, relief, horror, disbelief, it all collided inside her. Every harsh word he had said, every slammed door, every threatening glance, now had context. But context didn't erase pain. It didn't undo the months of torment, the nights spent crying silently in corners, the constant fear. Yet, with that revelation, something in her shifted. The fear began to crack. The anger, once simmering beneath her surface, now ignited. She realized she had survived, she had endured, and more importantly, she had a child who needed her strength. Damien's impotence, a secret he had hidden in shame and projection, didn't diminish her at all. It exposed him, his cruelty, and his own insecurities in stark relief. Marissa began planning. Not revenge, there was no need, but liberation. She organized her life with precision, quietly saving money, making arrangements, and building a support system around herself and her daughter. She learned that the greatest power she held was the ability to reclaim her own life, to move beyond the cage Damien had built with lies and manipulation. The confrontation, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. She told him calmly, firmly, that she would be leaving. No yelling, no begging, just facts and boundaries. Damien's face contorted with shock, confusion, a fleeting panic, but there was no remorse. Just the quiet unraveling of a man whose control had always depended on fear. As she walked away, holding her baby's tiny hand, Marissa felt something she hadn't felt in months: freedom. The weight of fear lifted, replaced by clarity. She had survived, and in doing so, she had discovered strength she hadn't known existed. Damien's impotence, once hidden and destructive, had inadvertently revealed the truth about him, and the truth about herself. Her life, fragile yet unbroken, stretched ahead like a horizon painted in light. For the first time, she realized that endurance could transform into empowerment, that suffering could evolve into understanding, and that the life she had fought to protect, the one inside her, and the one she now held in her arms, was worth every battle, every tear, every silent night spent wondering if she would ever be free. Marissa settled into her new rhythm with quiet determination. She moved into a modest apartment, furnished simply but comfortably, and decorated with touches that reflected her personality: warm colors, plants, and soft lights that made the space feel like home. Every detail was deliberate, a reminder that this life belonged to her, not Damien. Her daughter, little Amara, thrived in the change. Freed from the tension and coldness of her father's presence, she laughed more, played more, and even slept through the nights without waking in fear. Marissa watched her with a mixture of awe and relief. The small hand she held felt like proof that survival was not just possible, it could be beautiful. Even so, freedom wasn't instantaneous. Memories of Damien lingered, flashing in sudden moments: a slammed door, a cruel smile, a whispered insult. Marissa felt the familiar pang of anger rise, but she learned to redirect it. Anger became motivation, fear became caution, sadness became empathy, for herself, for Amara, for the life they were building. Damien, meanwhile, did not fade quietly. He attempted contact at first, sending messages laced with faux concern, guilt, and subtle threats. "I thought we could work this out," one read. Another, "You'll regret leaving. You don't understand the life I provide." Marissa ignored each one, deleting them without response, her resolve growing with every message. The first test of her independence came unexpectedly. She ran into Damien at a local grocery store. He looked composed, polished even, but Marissa could see the tension under his surface. His eyes searched hers, perhaps hoping for hesitation, fear, or guilt. He tried the charm, the smooth talk, the subtle insinuations. "Marissa, I've changed," he said, voice low, controlled. "I understand now. I can be better." She looked at him, really looked, seeing the same man who had spent months criticizing and belittling her, the man who had hidden his impotence behind rage and control. The words felt hollow. "I know who you are, Damien," she said quietly. "And you don't get another chance. I'm done." His expression faltered for a moment, revealing the truth he had carried all along. impotence was more than physical, it was the weakness he tried to mask with cruelty. In that pause, Marissa felt a sense of closure. She didn't need him to admit it, the silence spoke volumes. Over the following months, Marissa's life began to expand beyond mere survival. She returned to work, took on small projects she had always dreamed of pursuing, and started meeting new people, friends who respected her, colleagues who valued her, and neighbors who welcomed her warmth without pretense. Each interaction reinforced the reality she had fought so hard to reclaim: she was capable, independent, and free from the shadow of someone else's inadequacies. Damien, on the other hand, slowly retreated into his own life, unable to confront the consequences of his actions. Without the anger to hide behind, without the ability to manipulate through fear, he was left with the truth he had always avoided. His life was built on illusions, and the person he tried to control had become stronger than him. Marissa never sought revenge. She didn't need to. Her empowerment was its own victory. She focused on Amara, on creating a safe and loving environment, and on the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had endured, learned, and grown. By the time Amara celebrated her first birthday, Marissa realized she was no longer the same woman who had walked into that marriage naive and hopeful. She was stronger, wiser, and fully aware of her worth. Every smile from her daughter, every small success in her work, every moment of laughter among friends was a reminder: life could be beautiful, even after darkness. And so, Marissa's story became one of survival, revelation, and quiet triumph. Damien's impotence, once hidden, had revealed the truth of his character, and paradoxically, had shown Marissa the depth of her own resilience. She had survived cruelty, confronted deception, and emerged into a life where love, safety, and authenticity were no longer abstract concepts, they were the reality she held in her hands. The apartment smelled of fresh coffee and flowers that morning. Amara played on the rug, giggling at the small tower of blocks she had built. Marissa watched, her heart full, her mind calm. She no longer feared shadows or whispered threats. She had been tested, challenged, and hurt, but she had also discovered a power that no abuse could strip away. And in that quiet moment, she finally understood: the end of one story could be the beginning of another, brighter, freer, and more human than she had ever imagined.